Great. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Henry Schein Dental Academy webinar series. I'm Dr. Gary Severance with Henry Schein, and I'll be your moderator tonight. Tonight, we're very excited and anticipating a great webinar with Carrie Webber, who's the Chief Communications Officer with Jameson Management and the owner. And she'll be covering some tips to pursue a positive change. Now, before we get started, I want to cover a few things. There will not be any CE credit for tonight's program or the on-demand. We encourage that you be engaging with questions and answers. So you see that form at the bottom. You can ask any questions, and at the end of the program, time allowing, we'll be able to answer those questions. And tonight's webinar is sponsored by Henry Schein's Dental Business Institute, as well as Jameson Management. Carrie, it's all yours. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Severance. It's such a pleasure. Thank you for the introduction. And thank you to all of you that are joining me this evening, kicking off what I'm sure is a very full and busy week for you. So I am grateful for your time and choosing to spend it with me on a topic that I'm very passionate about: pursuing positive change, successful tips to leading change within your team. Now, if you're like many people in our profession over the past year, you have experienced a great deal of change. It was forced upon you, more than likely, in many ways. And you also, more than likely, if you're like a lot of the doctors and team leaders that I've talked to over the past months, it's allowed you the time to start to envision areas of your practice, of your business that you'd like to see performing differently, that you would like to add or you'd like to remove to, ultimately that you would like to change. And in order to do that, to successfully experience change in our businesses, in our practices, it's a matter of not only getting clear on what change it is that you want to see and to experience, but bringing your team along with you in that journey towards effective change. I'm very passionate about this topic because we at Jameson are advisors in business and in hygiene. We provide marketing services to dental practices across the country. And so our life is in the trenches of change. And I have conversations almost every single day with leaders that are looking for answers, for solutions, or exploring the what ifs of how things could be different in their practices for the future. So everything is rooted in this, in exploring change, in leading change, and ultimately in experiencing positive change. So let's begin. What we often see happen is you may be experiencing things in your practice that you want to have performing differently, or you may have started considering adding something to your practice. Perhaps you're taking some incredible CE and you want to add a new service mix to your practice for your patients. Whatever the case may be, often what happens in any business, in any realm, we as leaders, we can sometimes put the cart before the horse, can't we? I'm from the Midwest, so that's a very famous phrase, is saying, we put the cart before the horse on this one, where we may have made an investment in something, but we didn't really think through how we were going to effectively and successfully implement that with our team, in the practice, and for our patients. And so then what happens is we either get frustrated or tired in the effort of trying, and we stop, or it never successfully takes off for you, or we revert back to the habits or the systems or the skills that were once our comfort zone. So what I want to try to give you is a roadmap as leaders that are trying to initiate change, introducing something new to your practice, how to do this more successfully, how to have stickiness in your efforts so that you can see the fruits of your labor in the future, and you won't find yourself once again frustrated or discouraged in lackluster results from your efforts to change in a positive way. Interestingly, I follow an entrepreneur. I receive emails and messaging from an entrepreneur in the art world. And just today, he sent out a message that I felt like was so incredibly relevant to our topic this evening that I want to share just a bit of what this gentleman, his name is Eric Rhodes, shared in this message. He says, "We live in a world of instant gratification. Yet we all need to realize that excellence is in anything that requires time and practice. Excellence is in anything that requires time and practice. Not only do you need to recognize what the highest standards look like, you need to understand what it takes to accomplish them and not give in too soon. Far too many people give up and lose a world of opportunity because of their impatience." And ooh, did that sting when I read that this morning for me as a business owner. You start to get a vision of what you want or how you see things could be, and we're so impatient with wanting that instantly, and we don't take into consideration that yes, it can be achieved. Yes, it can be attained, but it's going to take some work on everyone's part, including yours, to get from where you are now to ultimately where you want to be. So let's get focused on what we need to do to achieve this. There's a book that actually my mother, the founder of Jameson, Kathy Jameson, loves. It's called Execution: The Discipline of Getting Things Done by Ram Charan and Larry Bossidy. And what their studies find in their studies of businesses across the board in all industries, that the main reason CEOs fail in their businesses is because of a lack of execution. And I see this and I hear this all the time with doctors that I talk to in initial phases of conversation, that they are exploring ways to be better, but they either don't know how to do that, they don't know how to execute that change, or they don't realize the amount of effort or thought that really needs to go behind preparing and getting focused to successfully implement the change. I'd like to offer to all of you as we continue into this content a gift from me and the team at Jameson. It's an ebook called Move the Needle: Small Steps to Make a Big Difference. A great deal of what I'm going to cover this evening is going to be in this ebook. So I want to share this with you. If you'd like to do further study and a deeper dive and have some resources to reference after we're completed, I'd love to give this to you. All you have to do is use your phone right now, grab a shot of this with your camera, and it should take you to this landing page that's also listed on this page, the jmsn.com/move the needle 2021. And you'll be able to download this complimentary resource for you. Again, I'm going to be touching on several of the items that are in that ebook. So if any of this rings true for you, that you need to do some work in these areas, I do invite you to take advantage of this complimentary resource as a gift from me to you. So let's dive in to what I consider 3 imperative keys to leading positive and successful change with your teams in your practice. Number 1, set the standard. Now, I'd love for you to share in the chat with each other what your role is in your practice. Are you the doctor? Are you an office manager? Are you a hygienist? Are you the business administrator, clinical assistant? Whatever your role is, share with your fellow colleagues where you are in this. And let me also tell you, I'm a firm believer that in whatever position and role you are in the practice, there's room for you to lead from within and partner with the practice owners and leaders for success and for a greater reward and fulfillment in the work that we do as a team as a whole. The first thing you have to do is set the standard. And what I mean by that, leaders, is you're often the reason we're putting the cart behind the cart before the horse, because we're just moving along. We are shooting at our arrows at whatever's flying by, and we are not focusing and aiming for what is right for you. Clarity in the vision of your business is a key for you to make healthy decisions for your practice's ongoing growth and health and well-being, and quite frankly, for your professional fulfillment. If you're off track right now and you know this does not feel right to you, this is not what right feels like for me, I want something different. The first step is to figure out what right feels like for you. What is the thing that needs to be different? Ultimately, what's the end goal? Beginning with the end in mind. So getting clear, aligned, and focused. And in doing so, once we're clear ourselves, then we have to be committed and about the business of communicating that effectively to our team. Who we are, why we do what we do, where we're going as a practice, and why the changes that you're introducing or bringing to the practice are important for the ultimate purpose and vision. So I want you to look at this as your purpose being your why. Why does my practice even exist? Why do we do what we do? What's most important to me that drives me, the values and the reason that I practice dentistry in the first place? That's going to be important to root everything back to what we are working to accomplish together, that purpose. The vision is where. Where are we going? Where am I taking this practice? Where is this path that I'm taking us all on leading to? Getting a great deal of clarity of that. So let's just use the example that you recognize that you want to expand the breadth of your services. Perhaps you want to do more comprehensive care. Perhaps you are wanting to do more digitally focused dentistry. Perhaps you want to reduce PPOs and insurances in your practice and bring in more fee for service patients. Whatever it is, we need to get really clear on what that looks like in your practice. What type of dentistry are you doing? What type of patients are you seeing? What is your team doing together? What are you bringing in? What's the reputation in your community for you? Once we can figure out that where we're going, the what, that outward facing mission to your community of what we do, how we accomplish our purpose in the pursuit of our vision, but also the setting of goals are the steps in the journey to get us closer to the vision. My husband, Jess Webber, who owns Jameson alongside with me, always says that our purpose is what we're married to. Your purpose is the reason you do what you do. Even if you weren't in dentistry, whatever type of career path you would choose was more than likely driven by this internal drive, your why. That's not going to change, but your vision will. So your purpose stays the same, but your vision over time will change. More than likely, those of you that have practiced 20 or more years at this point, your vision for your business and your practice is very different than your vision for what it was 5 years ago or 5 years in. And that's okay. That's actually a very healthy pursuit because we want to be in a continuous path of learning, of growth, of improvement. That's what makes it fulfilling. That's what makes a life and a profession well lived. Wouldn't you agree? So it's important for you to get clear on this. And the reason why is number one, if you're wanting to introduce any type of change, bringing a piece of technology in, adding an associate, doing a practice remodel, purchasing another practice, hiring a new team member, whatever the case may be, it has to be rooted in this clarity. Because number one, if we're going to be introducing anything that involves our team having to do something new, they have to see the why behind the what. Because we have to have their buy-in and their understanding and the alignment with them of what we're doing and why. At Jameson, we are crazy about change. We implement new things. Just ask my team members. We're introducing something new to them all the time. So we recognize how important it is, even internally in my own business, how important it is to root every decision that we make, whether it's a type of software we use for internal communications, whether it's how we change the way we provide a particular service in marketing, whatever the case may be, the why behind the what, whatever that change is, so that they're clear on where we're going, why, and what their role is in that change. There's another great book called The 5 Gears by two gentlemen, Jeremy Kubicek and Steve Cockrum. I'm from Oklahoma, and Mr. Kubicek is also an Oklahoman and has a great company called Giant Worldwide. And in the book, The 5 Gears, they ask a question in different elements of our lives. Where are you living intentionally? And where are you living accidentally? And when I read that question and the way that they painted that picture of what this means in individual growth, I was floored because it's the perfect question for you in your practice. Where in your practice are you practicing and living accidentally? And where are you practicing intentionally? Yeah, I'm talking about systems. I'm talking about skills, verbal skills, processes, how you schedule, how you execute a patient's experience and their appointments. All of those things are either being done intentionally and you're developing intentionally in those areas, and they could also be happening accidentally. You may be having what I call accidental success at this point. And quite frankly, the more you grow accidentally, the more chaotic and stressful even growth and success can feel to you. If you start to introduce change accidentally, you don't get the results that you desire. You certainly don't get them as quickly as you wish. How does accidental change look in practices? A lot of times, if you're trying to introduce a change accidentally, you've probably done it before, and your team members are rolling their eyes, going, "Oh, here we go again. Another piece of technology or another idea," right? Or it looks like a lot of well-intended effort that backslides again and again and again. There's no accountability in place. There's no consistency in place. And so your efforts fall flat. So where are you being intentional? Where are you being accidental? And let's shift to a more intentional effort. When you're getting clarity of where you're going and you determine, in my mind's eye, this is the type of practice I want, this is the type of care I want to provide, this is what I want to be doing more of, this is what I'm going to need, these are the tools or these are the systems that we need to change or the people that we're going to need to help make this a reality. You have to clearly and consistently communicate that to the team and recognize not everybody may be on the same page as you. This is what they call the attitude bell curve. And this is where your mindsets of the large majority of society live in any different topic. In your practice, let's say your team, you're going to introduce that you're going to invest in a new piece of technology and you're going to introduce that into your workflow. The 15% that are supportive are going to be right on board for this. They're up for it. They're excited about it. They are, yes, they are the choir that you're preaching to. There may be 15% that are resistant. They're thinking, no, that this is never going to work. We've never done it that way. We've always done it this way. Our patients would never do this. Our team will never implement this. All of the naysaying. But the magic is in the neutral 70%. This is the large majority of your team that can really go either way. It's all about how you communicate it, how consistently you communicate it, and how much you are behind whatever change you're introducing. So what often happens is we get frustrated when the first time we bring this up, or even the second, that we don't get much shift. The needle doesn't move much. Be patient. Remember what Mr. Rhodes said in his message, that our impatience is often getting in the way of the long game of success. So we need to figure out what's the message, what's the change, what are we working toward, and continuously revisit this message until the light bulbs start to go off and your majority shift in the positive and acceptance attitude. This is also what they call, you could see this in a lot of searches about the change curve. And it's basically where you have your early adopters, where are the supportive element on this side. And then you have your kind of middle, they're coming, the large majority. The early and late majority is what they call it. And then the resistant are called the laggards. So this is what you're going to be facing in most efforts for change. At Jameson, we talk about building these four pillars with our patients in terms of that patient practice partnership and how we want to help build a relationship that the patients are saying yes to treatment, staying active in your practice. They're committed to your practice because we are hitting the mark on building pillars of trust, a sense of need, a sense of urgency for your care, and a sense of value for it. And I'm going to turn this over to the same thing is true in your responsibility with your team. If you're wanting to see change, we have to make sure we have a work environment where your team members are engaged to the point that they trust you, they trust the practice, they trust their teammates, they see a need for the work that you do, they see a need for the change you're introducing. They feel a sense of urgency in their role in incorporating that change, and they see a value in it. We have to get them on board because if they don't see the value of the change, it's going to be a long haul, my friends. So get really clear first. The first thing, do first things first. Get clear for your own self what right looks like in your practice. Where does this change you're exploring or wanting to implement in your practice fit in that overall practice vision? How does it support the why of your practice, the who that you are, the what that you do? If it indeed supports your mission, your vision, your purpose, it's a good change. And we will believe in it ourselves as the leaders, and we will want to work consistently and persistently to see it through to success. The second key is leaders, we not only need to set that standard, we have to reflect it. Your teammates are looking at you and your behaviors and your efforts and what you're putting into place to help it be successful as their basically their standard of expectation. So whatever we're putting into play, whatever change we're introducing, we have to be supporting it and setting it up for success, even in our own skills, even for our own selves, so that we're reflecting what's expected of your team. So we have to take the time to train. A lot of practices want to see things differently. They want something to change either in how the practice is performing, how they're doing something, or they want to introduce something or someone into the practice, but they have let time to train and meet as a team fall by the wayside. This is just some insights past post 2020 that we see practices at this point in the stage and the season are struggling with. A lot of this is that endurance factor of being so fatigued in the stress and the change and all of the things that the last year has brought. But you can see they're struggling with staying motivated as teams. There's a lot of hiring and turnover that may be happening, or not an ability to even find good candidates to hire. Communication, the time to communicate, which is what I'm speaking to right now, to help keep everyone on the same page and moving in the right direction, has fallen by the wayside. And we're using that time in other aspects of recovery, not realizing just how important making that time is for your practice's long-term success. And the lack of training and development for when we do have team turnover and training, or we do recognize something needs to change, the lack of time, the lack of systems to support it is preventing us from being as successful as we could be. So this is a great quote that I love, that high performers spend much more time practicing and upgrading their skills than low performers. So making the time to train. My father, Dr. John Jameson, he's a retired dentist, and a lot of the foundational systems that Jameson teaches were founded in his practice. And he always says, when he was speaking regularly on technology and the incorporation of technology into practices, he would always say, if you're going to make that investment in that technology, please, please, please make the investment in the training for your team. It's not just about in introducing a change in technology. This is about anything you're wanting to see differently in your practice. You cannot expect little 5-minute conversations here and there to get you the results that you want or need. So taking the time to train. So my question for you is, are you having consistent and regular daily huddles to keep your team aligned on the productivity of that day and have an all hands on deck approach to making sure the following days are as successful as they could be? This is your opportunity to choreograph something successful for your dental days. And also, as you're introducing something new, introducing a change, you can keep this at front of mind by these times that we're connecting, not just being the ships passing in a busy day. Also, are you having regularly scheduled and effective team meetings? Are you setting intentional agendas? Are you going through topics of growth and development that are ultimately going to help you achieve the goal that you're striving toward, whatever that change is? Taking the time. And a lot of people say, yeah, we're having team meetings. I mean, I guess they're okay, because we're being more accidental in the running of those meetings. We need to be thinking more effectively, more intentionally on how to do that successfully. In the Move the Needle ebook, I have more on team meetings and how to be more effective and intentional in leading them for team engagement and for implementation. I also talk a lot about this: goal setting and problem solving. This is what's going to get you over the hump. You may introduce something, but your success in implementing that change with your team is going to depend upon their competency with that, whatever skill or system or tool or whatever the case may be that you need from them, their confidence in it, their buy-in for it. And so all of that is set in time to goal set. Here's the goal. Here's where we're going. Here's the strategy. Here's who's doing what. Here are the deadlines by when. This is going to offset that procrastination that you often see in the change factor, that journey, but also time to problem solve. Where are we stuck? And creating a safe culture where your team members can voice where their obstacles are and we can practice and problem solve together. This is a Japanese term, Kaizen, in the business realm that means, in a nutshell, continual improvement. This is the concept that I want you to start thinking about, is that we're never finished. Our businesses are never done. They're never perfect. And we are going to continue to strive. We're going to strive and we're going to start to communicate and present and represent the standard that we are striving for excellence in everything that we do, continual improvement. So in those team meetings that you're going to start having, you can utilize this excellent tool to problem solve through and work on the ways forward for successful change. This was developed by a gentleman by the name of Sir John Whitmore. He has since passed away several years ago, but he was a great leader in management for business. And he talks about this. This is for problem solving, for goal setting. This can be used with individuals. This can be used as a group. What's the goal? Where are you wanting to go? What's the change you want to see happen? What's the reality? Where are you right now? Where are we stuck? What does reality in that piece of your practice look like right now? And then giving time to explore and brainstorm and think creatively about what are our options for solutions. I'm a big fan of solutions-focused conversations. A lot of times teams stop having team meetings because they may start taking negative turns. It becomes more of a complaining session, or it feels like Groundhog Day. We're just having the same conversations over and over again. So it's time to pivot our mindsets and being more solutions focused. So what are our options as solutions? And then determining what is the way forward that we are going to focus on and take and start to implement. This gets your whole team involved. This also is something for you to do individually. If you're thinking about a goal right now, if you're thinking about that burning, gnawing aspect of your practice that you want to see change, what is the goal? What would you ideally like that to look like? And what's the reality of where you are now? And what are the options of how we could take next steps in a way forward to get closer to right? The Grow Method by Sir John Whitmore. The next key that I want you to think about is you're setting the standard, you're reflecting the standard through your actions to support your vision of where you're going or what change you're wanting to implement with your team. And then we're going to expect the standard. This is a hard one because it's all about accountability, but it's also all about your consistency. Do you mean it? Do you mean it about that change that you're wanting to introduce, that new thing you're bringing to the table? What do we really want to achieve? And then we need to set that, reflect it, and expect it. So we want to motivate for strength in mindset and in skill set. Again, we are prioritizing time, communication, energy, and effort for the long game. You, as the leaders, you don't get to be exempt from the effort. You are going to have to be a part of the process. So, motivating your team, sticking with it with them for strength and development in team mindset and skill sets. Um, you probably heard this, the learning curve. I think this gets almost misused, even for my own self. I always say, oh, but they're just, the learning curve is so steep. So then, curious me, I started wondering, well, what does that even mean? What is the learning curve? So here is the true definition of the theory of the learning curve. The learning curve is the relationship between how proficient someone is at a task and the amount of experience they have. So basically, it means the more someone does something, the better they get. Sounds a little bit like your clinical skills, right? You are probably significantly more proficient, your learning curve, you are more proficient at the dentistry you provide than you were when you were a dental student. And the same is for your team, the same is for you in your business skills. You may not be very proficient in your verbal skills, in your scheduling skills, in your new patient experience skills, whatever the case may be, but we have to practice. We have to create a process that everyone can be on the same page about what's expected, whose roles are within that process. And then we practice those things until we become proficient. So your goal when you're introducing change is to make room for to make that learning curve go up as fast as possible by giving yourself as much opportunity to practice as possible early on. So introducing CAD/CAM into your practice, when are you taking time with your team to work with the tool, to practice your verbal skills, to talk about how you're going to introduce this to patients and present this type of treatment, how to actually use it in your practice, what are the best practices for it, and so on. That's an example. So taking that time again to determine what is going to help us become as proficient, as competent as possible in this change, because what you're ultimately going to be doing, if it's not about introducing a brand new piece of technology, if you're wanting to change the way your practice runs, you are going to be asking team members to break habits. And that can be challenging. We need to have cues. We need to have things that are going to remind us of the new habits. We need to have that reward recognition of work well done. Those kinds of things are going to help us rebuild our habits to be closer to what's ideal in terms of how you want your practice to run. This is another historical business leader, W. Edwards Deming. He actually was a management consultant figure in the early mid 1900s. And he created what they call the Deming cycle, or the plan, do, check, act cycle. So I want to introduce this to you to see that we're never done. Kaizen, continual learning. When you start to introduce change, you have to go back to it and make sure that you are doing what you need to do. Inspect what you expect. A gentleman by the name of Ken Thorson said that. Inspect what you expect. So, how are you going to introduce change? We're going to do the plan, do, check, act cycle. What's the plan? We're going to use goal setting and action planning. We're going to introduce the vision, what the ultimate goal is, use that grow method, and then we're going to determine the way forward and we're going to action plan that out. What's the first step? Who's responsible for that? What's the deadline? Because we have to time frame things or we will procrastinate and we won't do them unless you're better than me at that, because I am a continual procrastinator. I've set deadlines for myself all the time. And then we need to evaluate. So planning, goal setting and action planning. And then once we get an initial plan in place, we're going to do it. We're going to put it into play. We're going to introduce it into the day. We're going to work on it. Then we're going to go back to it. We're going to check on it. We're going to measure and evaluate our progress on this change. So we're going to plan it. Then we're going to start doing it, but we're going to come back and we're going to check on it. How's it going? Where are we stuck? Did we do it? What needs to change? What do we need to work on? And then again, we're going to act. We're going to standardize it. It's going to become a process. It's going to become a system. It's going to be a set expectation of how we communicate. Whatever the case may be, we're going to get it in writing. It's going to be a process or a protocol or a system or procedure, whatever the case may be. So plan it, set the goals, action plan it, do it, give it a shot, jump in there with both feet and start working the plan. Check on it, inspect what you expect. And then once it starts to feel like we are gaining competency and it's becoming a new healthy habit, we're going to act on it. We're going to standardize it so that anybody new coming into our practice is going to be trained on that too. That's the expectation. Everyone's clear on what this process is and what their role is in that process. The Deming cycle: plan, do, check, act. Use grow. What's the goal? What's the reality? What are the options? What's the way forward? Remember these tools so that you can recognize, just like Mr. Rhodes said, it's not for instant gratification. If it's important enough for the vision of your business, it's important to take all the way. You're going to be well ahead in that attitude change curve than a lot of your team. And so you have to understand they have to catch up to you, and you have to have the consistency in your messaging, in your reflection of what you're introducing, and in your expectations and holding them accountable to that positive change in order for it to stick. So again, as Mr. Thorson said, inspect what you expect. That can be a big frustration, is that you think you may have introduced something to the team, like, we're going to do this is how we're going to do this, or this is what we're going to bring on. And then you find out months down the road, no one's using it, or it's being massively underutilized, or they're not saying it that way, or whatever the case may be. And you can be very frustrated because we're not doing the check aspect of the cycle. And I'm not saying to big brother and hold a tight leash. That is not what I'm saying. This is an entire team process that we all are a part of this change. How's everyone doing? What does it look like when it works well? How does it feel? What's it looking like when it doesn't? And how does that feel? What can we do to help each other be better so that more often than not, it is the right way that feels great? That's where that buy-in, remember, people are going to be motivated in their own way and a willingness to change. And so we have to make available not only the communication skills to clearly communicate it, but giving them room to develop the tools and the skills within their own selves to be successful at it. And then we are creating an environment where we are continual learners, that we are setting it up for the mindset that we are a high-performing practice, continuously developing, and the skill sets. And I'll tell you what, when you become that kind of practice, you start to attract the type of team members that want to be a part of that practice, that type of practice. There are people that are driven and motivated to be in high-performing practices that make room for them to grow and develop. That's also a big key in improving engagement, Is there room to communicate? Is there time to communicate? Do they have room and space in your world to develop and grow professionally in their own right? And that's going to help you create those change agents within your practice to help you be about the business of achieving your ideal vision for your practice. So, in your practice, where are you working intentionally and where are you working accidentally? Where do you need to focus your attention starting tomorrow and get clear on what right looks like for you? What do you need to bring in to help you get closer to ideal in that area? Do you need a new tool? Do you need to change the way a system works? Do you need to put a different team member in a different seat on your bus? Do you need to hire an external resource, a coach, a company, a tool, a software to help you accomplish your vision for that area? And then how are we going to introduce that to your team? Why does that decision support your mission, your purpose, your ideal vision? And how are we going to get your team the tools and the training to be successful in the embracing and implementation of that change with you? I know that sounds like a lot. I know that sounds overwhelming. Take it one step at a time. What's the first step? Your first step is getting clear on your vision and getting clear on what the change is and why it supports your ideal vision. Your next step is how you're going to communicate that to everyone. And then your next step is to determine the first way forward to get you closer to that change. That's what it's all about. You can hear from all sorts of experts and businesses and tools and resources. But if you continuously chase with no clear vision of what your lane is that is right for you, it will fall flat. So the more you make decisions based upon you and what's right for your journey in your practice, the more likely you're going to get a team that's on board for that. Taking the time necessary to train, to develop, to connect and communicate and stay aligned as a team is also going to make all the difference. If you're onboarding new team members right now and you're not taking the time to train them, it feels pretty chaotic, doesn't it? There's a lot of fixing that's more than likely happening. There's a lot of backtracking and a lot of wasted energy and effort that if we put the focus in at the time that it was appropriate, you would be smooth sailing right now. Well, hindsight's always 2020. So when's the best time to start prioritizing that time to work with our team? Now is good. So start making time working on your business, not just in your business. If my dad was sitting with me right now, he would tell you that the greatest investment he ever made was the time in meetings with his teams, huddles, monthly team meetings, quarterly, long, multi-hour brain trust meetings, working on the practice, on the systems, on the skills to help them be their very best when they were with their patients. That connection time matters. So, what's the one thing? What's your one thing that you know after all of this time you've been able to spend reflecting on, boy, wouldn't it be great if, boy, I sure wish we could do this. Man, it sure seems like this could work better, but I just don't know what needs to be done. What's the one thing that you know needs to change? And how can you communicate that to your team? Not just once, not just twice, but consistently through an act of continual learning, Kaizen, in your practice. Get clear, set the standard, reflect the standard, and then expect the standard for continuous growth. I once again want to encourage you to download the complimentary ebook. Here is the QR code that you can scan to access Move the Needle. It's resources from the Jameson Rate Your Practice exercise so that you can start to get some clarity on how you're performing in what we consider some of your most integral systems in your practice. There's also a goal setting sheet so that you can start action planning goals for as a team together in your next team meeting starting immediately. The grow steps are in there and more. So if you're wanting to continue to improve your own continual improvement in leadership and leading toward positive change, download this ebook. And then if you'd like to have a discovery call with me personally about your practice and how Jameson could help you introduce positive change with your team, for your practice, ultimately for your patients, it would be my pleasure to do so. I invite you to reach out to us in any of these ways, and we can reserve that together. And I look forward to meeting you and having that conversation at that time. So once again, thank you for your time this evening. And remember this, I want to close just with this statement by John Gordon. What we put our energy and attention on starts to show up more in our lives. So it's time to put attention on those things that are going to make the biggest difference for your ultimate health and happiness and fulfillment in the work that you do in the dental profession. Thank you. And I'll turn it back over to Dr. Severance.
Carrie, thank you so much. It's wonderful to hear your message time and time again. And what I really appreciate of what you and your family have done is really kept the standard, because you and I worked together 10 years ago on implementing, and every time we instituted a new piece of technology, we made sure your team went in to consult and make sure they used it. And like you said, it sticks. When the team uses it and they're engaged and they know the story, it stays within the office, and your group does that wonderfully. During the time you were speaking, I did download Move the Needle. Everybody should on this. It's pretty incredible. I love the rating. That'll show right where you are and show the goods and the bads. So thank you again for always encouraging complete team engagement, delegation, and getting everybody on board. It's certainly the direction that it has to be. We've got a few questions. If you have time, we have time.
Absolutely. Yes, my pleasure.
Yeah. During the pandemic, while offices were closed, what was it like for your team, you and your team? Encouraging education or setting new standards?
Yeah, yes, the ongoing message on social media was that everybody was just binge watching Netflix and laying on the couch. That was not the case at Jameson. So I feel like we need to have take a month off just to do something. No, I'm teasing, but it really was a very intense time, just as it was for the dentists and practice leaders that are on. I'm sure it probably is exhausting just to even reflect back. But with every month, every day, every week, it almost felt like we were stepping into an entirely new issue or concern or question. And it was being turned to us to find those answers. It may not be that we knew the answer, but to find resources and partners. Many of the partners through the Henry Schein portfolio, the men and women that lead those organizations, were doing a great deal of work to stay on top of finding solutions for these practices. And the same was true for us, partnering with these organizations to help find the solutions, from how do I shut down a practice? What do I tell our patients? What do we say on social media? To how do I lay off? Do I furlough? How do we bring everybody back? How do we find the PPE we need? What do we need to do to be compliant? And how do we start to schedule patients back into the practice? All of that, just every week, something new. And so it was, boy, talk about a learning curve. So it was intense. It was intense. And I'm certainly grateful to our team and how hard they worked for the people that entrusted us to be guides with them. But I'm also very appreciative to many dental organizations out there, including Henry Schein, that were doing great work to find solutions for the sake of our profession.
But I'm sure you appreciated all the clients that entrusted you to lead the way back during this time. And it probably was a great time for them to focus on their own practice and some of the things you're talking about on training. And that's what we see. One of the greatest benefits is when you can train your team, get them on board, supportive, because they can sabotage, any wrong decision you make if you don't support it itself with that. one of the questions was, how do we get our team members? It's based on your change curve
Mhm.
from resistant to neutral or from neutral
Mhm.
to supportive. What are some of the key indices for that?
Well, let's be real honest about it. You may not be able to get everybody that's on the resistant side over into the supportive side, right? And what I think we do a lot that is a misstep is we focus most of our communication and our effort and attention on one of the 15 percenters. Remember the supportive,
Mm.
the neutral, and the resistant. And so if you're spending all your time preaching to your choir supportive, you have a big group of team that don't that are not bought in, right? If we spend all of our time on the naysayers, you may have a lot more people that would be willing to go the distance with you, and we're not giving our energy to that. So remember, focusing on those neutral, talking, sharing a clear vision, the why behind the what, remember that. Show them the benefits of this change. When we start to communicate on the benefits, not just the benefits for you or even for the practice, but the benefits for the patients, for the benefits for them. Everyone's driven by what's in it for me. So showing the benefits for the team of what this change could mean, and then giving room for them to share their own insights. If I'm a part of the decision, if I've participated in that, what are the options and what's the way forward? If my insights are valued, I'm going to have more sense of ownership for incorporating that change. So, how much are we just talking at our team about this is what we're doing versus how much are we including them in that conversation of here's where we want to go? I've been doing some research on certain aspects, but I now want to bring you into the conversation and get your insights of what you feel
Mm.
could be the most beneficial way forward. Knowing that the goal is we want to get here and we're over here. These are my ideas. What are yours? And getting them more involved and more engaged in that conversation earlier on.
And I think if anything through the pandemic, it made our team members, because we know they're dental patients and they relate very well to the dental patients, they could see the patient's view of the whole pandemic
Yes.
too.
Yes.
So in your the recovery state that I'm sure you're talking with all the offices on, are you seeing any hesitancy of the patients coming back into the dental offices? Or what are you encouraging them to
Um,
do to make
right.
it a more conducive environment for their feelings?
No. In fact, I would say I'd be curious if anyone that is still on with us would share how is it in your practices right now? Because we are seeing some very busy practices. They are fully booked, and sometimes the struggle is we
Finding
didn't
time.
we don't know how to get people back in a timely fashion. Um, and let me also tell you, when you're thinking about this, you have to start thinking ahead of yourself. You have to start thinking, very proactively and thinking ahead, because what happened is we had a big gap in the spring. You then felt the gap again in the fall because of, for hygiene and so on. So what are we doing to start to close that gap for the future? We have to start thinking about processes that can support the practice ideally. So interestingly, I think the patients are back, and the studies that the ADA and the Health Policy Institute are sharing with all of us is that patients are saying they're ready, they're coming back. And several state organizations are doing their own surveys. California Dental Association is doing a lot about the patient's perception of care, and they're ready to come back. um, if they haven't already gone back into the dental practices, and what they're appreciating are practices that are very clear in communicating the steps they're taking to keep
Mhm.
them safe. And all the efforts that practices are taking, for the most part, are deeply appreciated by the patients.
And I'm sure you recommend continual communication to those patient base throughout the
Yes.
time period. And I
Yes.
also know you have a marketing arm as well.
Yes.
Are there
Yes.
tools that you're using to make sure the patients are aware that dentistry is one of the safest professions there is, and
Yes.
trusted? And
I think, what I was saying throughout the crisis, I did a lot of webinars on communicating in a crisis. And my philosophy is you cannot over communicate.
Mhm.
If anything, the biggest disservice you can do is to not communicate. So the practices that did the effort, again, I talked about you're not immune to being a part of the solution. We always have to roll up our sleeves. If it's important enough, you got to do the effort. And while it may feel like it's the 100,000th time you've communicated to the patients what you're doing, to that patient in the chair, it's the first time. And so we have to have that mindset that you can't over communicate. And those that were more consistent and very, proactive about that, there was less misunderstanding about what to expect in the changes in their appointments. So there was less confusion, there was less fear, there was less frustration because they were communicating to them early on in those processes to make sure the patient was walking in knowing what they could expect. Now, from a marketing standpoint, keeping that in your communications is absolutely valuable. You may be one of the only healthcare resources that are regularly staying in contact with your community and your patients about, again, what right looks like in terms of the efforts you're taking to keep them safe, how hard we as a profession work and have always worked to keep ourselves, our team members, and our patients safe. So your transparency and continuous communication of that, in my opinion, is always going to do more good than anything else.
That's great. And then a little off the track, but still part of, I know what you guys discuss. When do I know that I'm ready to hire or bring on an associate?
Mm. Well, I think it's again going back to your vision. Number one, a lot of times that is a big cart before the horse topic. I'm sure you can appreciate that, Dr. Severance. We start to feel the pain of hitting our capacity, or we start to desire balance in our lives as business owners, as the owners, because you feel like you're a bit on a treadmill. Um, and so we go directly to the best possible solution to free us up a little bit. But there have to be systems in place to support another doctor, another producer. Are you on track? Are you trending in growth of production and collections to fully support another provider? Do you have the systems in place and the tools to build up another person's schedule as quickly as possible? And what are the important values in your philosophy of care that you need to be looking for in an associate that would be a great teammate and partner with you in your care? Because if we go the fast track, again, you may find yourself a few months down the line realizing this wasn't a great fit at all, but I just tried to get a quick fix and get somebody in here and didn't decide to do the work for, again, like I said earlier, the long game. So getting clear on your vision of what ideal looks like, how does an associate fit in that vision, and then taking a really good look at your numbers and your practice's current performance, both financially, in terms of new patient acquisition, and in the systems in the practice to realistically determine, can we successfully bring on an associate, and how long would it take us in theory with what we have in place right now to get them rolling at a good pace.
Right. And final question. My longtime dental assistant tries to anticipate and assume what I want and need, which is what they do, but many times it's not correct. When I tell her so, she doesn't take it so well. I don't want to burst her bubble, but what can I say to her in the right way to get a positive change?
Well, here's your perfect opportunity is you can say, Carrie, you have a meeting with me. Let's say I'm your assistant. Carrie, I was in a great meeting and I realized that there were things that I could be doing better for us to work more effectively together. I'd love to sit down with you and brainstorm ways that we could, be an even better team than we already are. And in that, I was introduced to some great tools by Jameson. And one is a procedure analysis that if you'd like that, you can email me and be happy to share that with you, or just work it out yourself. It's really taking the procedures that perhaps you're not on the same page about. What's ideal to you in terms of the room setup, how he or she supports you, walking through those procedures so that everyone's on the same page. And I'll tell you, be helpful if the whole team did that with you, because it may not even be the assistant that is confused, is the only one confused or anticipating incorrectly. You could have a business team member that's scheduling incorrectly, not realizing what you need to be successful in that appointment. So getting clear on some of those more problematic appointments or procedures with your team is just good process building. Again, like we said in the plan, do, check, act cycle. Remember the Deming cycle? We talk about checking on that and making sure that we're putting a good process into place and then standardizing that for everyone. So you could use your time in your meetings with Carrie to be a great brainstorming session of how we can standardize these, make sure we're on the same page so that we can teach other people on the team
Right.
and get everyone on the same page. I hope that's
Right.
helpful.
Yep, sounds great. I'm married to a dental assistant, so I'm going to rewatch this one and take those things in there. So thank you for that input.
You're welcome.
But that's right, getting everybody on the same page and the same vision. So that's wonderful. Carrie, thank you for another great webinar. It's always so great to hear from you. Certainly appreciate what your family and now you are doing for dentistry to make it the best profession it can be and continually improving the Kaizen.
Thank you.
For those that are attending, we had a great turnout tonight. Thank you very much. We'll email you a contact to the recording of this so you can have that. And as always, if you want to give us more information, ask questions, we can forward along to Carrie. If you have ideas for future webinars, or if you just have some comments, please email us at henryscheindental.com/webinars to see the webinar, to see the upcoming schedule. But you can also email us at webinars@henryschein.com. Again, everybody, thank you for your attention. Carrie, thank you so much. Great to see you again.
Thank you.
And everybody have a great night.
Thank you.